Good evening and welcome to The Race. I'm Chance Seales in Atlanta. 2024 has two clear frontrunners, but one man's outsider run could shift the outcome of this whole election. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is no stranger to American politics or controversy. We sat down for a wide-ranging interview today, nothing off limits, and he tells me he is ready to fight to be on the presidential debate stages. And he's hitting back directly at the New York Times for, as he sees it, smearing his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, at her lowest moment. I know you actually want to be on the debate stage. I'm sure you hear a lot about being platformed, and you physically want to be on that platform. It's not clear that these other candidates would like you to be up there. I think Donald Trump said, okay, if he makes it, he makes it. But Elon Musk has now offered to host. Would you like to invite President Biden to participate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. I would like to debate President Biden and President Trump in any forum. CNN has offered them a forum, and under the FEC rules, CNN has to announce objective criteria, and then they have to comply with that criteria. Well, they announced objective criteria, and those criteria were that in order to get on this stage, you needed to be at least 15% in 4 national polls from companies that they designated from a limited number of polling organizations. Well, as it turns out, we submitted them 5 polls from those companies, plus a 6th poll came out today, as you just noted.
You got to be at 15%, and then you have to have the Electoral College viability, right?
And you have to have viability for 270 electoral votes. Well, we will have enough signatures by June 20th, which is the cutoff date. We will have enough signatures for 343 electoral votes. So we will qualify to that extent. We already are on the ballot in certain states.
5, right?
I think it's 7, but you could be right. It may be 5. And we have enough ballots for another 8. We have enough ballots. I think we have enough signatures to get on the ballot in 16. We've been holding them back.
So let's say CNN doesn't let you in.
But let me just finish that thought, Chance. I'm the only one who's going to be on the ballot in any state on June 20th, because I think they made an error because they used criteria that was taken from the Presidential Commission on Debates, and they usually don't debate until September. So by then there's a nominee in both political parties, and they have, they meet that criteria. But right now, President Trump and President Biden are not nominees. They're presumptive nominees, but they are on the ballot in no states. So I'm the only one. If you want to find somebody who's the most qualified, I'm the most qualified.
Will you sue if they still say no?
Today we filed a complaint with the FEC. And, we believe that if the FEC enforces the law, that they're going to find that there's also evidence, strong evidence that's been reported in the mainstream media of collusion between the Trump campaign, the Biden campaign, particularly the Biden campaign, and CNN.
You have expressed a certain openness to considering a pardon for January 6th rioters. Right now, there are 2 federal cases against former President Trump. Would you be open to possibly pardoning him?
Well, what I've said is that I'm going to look at pardons for anybody. So I think, some of the January 7th rioters were, committed crimes. They committed violence against the police. They broke in. They destroyed government property, and they were properly convicted, and they need to be punished for those crimes. There may be people who were bystanders, who were...
Sure. I know, but I'm talking about former President Trump here. I understand the J6 position.
I'll look at, pardons for anybody, but I'm not going to start announcing pardons for people or... and it would be improper for me to do that unless there was really clear and convincing evidence that they were not guilty. The people that I've talked about are actually pardoning Edward Snowden and Julian Assange.
Okay.
But it's also not really proper to pardon somebody until they've been convicted of a crime.
You've been a vocal supporter of Israel. Do you support the unconditional flow of weapons to Israel still?
Well, I think we should send the weapons to Israel that we promised and that Congress voted on. I don't support a blank check for Israel. I've been very critical of.
Meaning money or weapons?
Well, I don't co-sign for everything that the Netanyahu government does. I disagree with a lot of their policies. I was very vocal against the judicial reforms. Last summer, I think some of the settlements on the West Bank are illegal, and that the government has been colluding with the settlers in some case, appears to be.
What about Rafah? Are you open to that? Rafah, a full-scale invasion?
I think that Israel needs to destroy Hamas. If otherwise, what's going to happen? Hamas has vowed to the destruction of Israel, to the annihilation of Israel, to the extermination of the Jewish people. Hamas has in its charter that it is against Islamic law to even negotiate with Israel. So, people who are saying we want a ceasefire, there's been 5 ceasefires. On the October 7th events were in the middle of a ceasefire. So, every time there's been a ceasefire, Hamas has used that to rearm, regroup, hoist the banner for another attack. And Hamas says itself there's going to be more and more on October 7th. So I don't see how you negotiate. They've said we're not going to negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate about except the annihilation of Israel. And I don't see how you start rebuilding
They're
Gaza.
Negotiating indirectly right now. We know that about
they're
negotiating
over hostage releases and.
You're talking about long term?
How do you, what happens the day after a ceasefire? Everything goes back to normal and Hamas begins with Iranian help rebuilding its armies, its weapon caches for the next attack. I don't think Israel can look, I'm very much anti-war. I don't think I think in the last century, there has been only one moral war that we fought, and that's World War II. I think World War I was an immoral war. It was a war of choice. World War II was a moral war because we were attacked, and it was a defensive war against an implacable enemy that was vowed to our destruction. The same is true of Israel. This is a defensive war. Under Article 5 of the UN Charter, nations are allowed to defend themselves.
Okay.
And that's what Israel's doing. And we made a choice after World War II to go into Germany and denazify Germany. Mm-hmm. And, there was actually an argument at that time between Churchill and Roosevelt, because Churchill said we shouldn't ask for an unconditional surrender and the denazification because then all these Germans are going to fight to the death. And FDR said, no.
We're going to do it.
We need to do that. We'll never get a real peace. We killed 2 million German civilians, but today Germany is the richest country in Europe, and it's a peaceful country.
About your campaign. You chose Nicole Shanahan as your running mate maybe 6 weeks ago or so, I think it was. The New York Times, I'm certain you've seen these headlines, they went deep on her background, blistering headlines out there, questioning her judgment, her past behavior. You know the DNC, the knock against you, they say he just wants her checkbook, the $15 million that she's expended, on the cause. Do you feel Nicole Shanahan is qualified to be president?
Absolutely, and I wouldn't have chosen her if she wasn't. And we did a deep vetting process, Nicole, and, including dozens of hours of interviews with many people. What the Times has done, the Times is working with the DNC, with Liz Smith and the group of people at the DNC whose job it is to spend, they've got $3 billion. They're not using that to amplify Joe Biden's record or his message or his voice. They're using it to try to keep me off the ballot by either, legally keeping me off or by reputationally destroying me or Nicole. The issue is all of those issues that the Times dredged up were issues that came out of her divorce. Well, most Americans know that when they're going through divorce, it is the most traumatic thing that can happen to a person. In fact, I read Psychology Today article years and years ago, which had listed the greatest traumas that can happen to people, like losing a limb, being sentenced to prison, losing a child. The number one trauma is divorce.
Interesting.
Because there's so much betrayal, there's so much sense of a loss of self, there's a sense of fault, there are all the economic insecurities and what happens to your friends and all of these betrayals that go on. People are not at their best then. Many people suffer depression and despair at that time, and you act in ways that sometimes are not at your best. And for the Times to go into, an old divorce and say this is an accurate picture of who Nicole Shanahan is, I think every American should be. Half of Americans' marriages now end in divorce. I think every American should be offended by that. Nicole is one of the smartest human beings I've ever met. She has great judgment. She is a quick study on all of these issues. She is a master of many issues, including the ones that I, are most interested in, these existential issues about particularly the use of AI. The chronic disease epidemic in our country, she knows as much about it as anybody else, and that's our biggest economic issue.
Okay, so you're standing by her very clearly.
Yeah.
We should note quickly, Mr. Kennedy said that they were filing a complaint with the FEC today. His campaign letter clarified the complaint will be filed on Tuesday, but it is forthcoming. We have to sneak in a very quick break tonight, but more of our conversation with RFK Jr. still ahead, including how he feels about the very public discord in the Kennedy clan. Stay with us.